Elizabeth Arden Cream.
This one's wife. Why does she cling on? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. This one's wife has reappeared. Having kept a comparatively low profile for her, she popped up on Thursday night at a launch party for highbrow hippie and, once again, flexed her narcissism. As a consequence of pictures that have been doing the rounds on social media and also mainstream media, various people have been querying, why on earth does she behave this way? Why is she such a Klingon? Why does she wrap herself around people? Why does she lean into them in that manner? Why does she always have to be touching and holding people? Well, they are legitimate questions, but you really ought to know the answers to these by now. But naturally it provides me with a further opportunity to explain. So on your screen you can see a picture of this one's wife with Katie Lee, the hair colorist who is supposedly her friend but isn't really, she's just purchased, and Serge Normand, who is also supposedly a friend but he has done this one's wife's hair at her wedding and perhaps since, and therefore he's also a purchased friend. But I've spoken about the fact that she has no friends earlier. But what do we notice in this picture? Well, let's first of all look at Serge. There he is, on the right of the picture. He's not touching anybody. He's positioned himself so that he's leaning in slightly for the photograph, as you would do. You would say that's an entirely natural pose for somebody that's having their photograph taken. So that's fair enough. We look at Katie Lee. She's the centre, it's her night, so it makes sense that she's at the centre of the photograph. She's holding a bouquet of flowers. She's got her arm around this one's wife. I suspect that she's had little choice but to put it there, given the fact that the limpet, the facehugger from Alien, is so close to Katie Lee that she wouldn't be able to keep her arm comfortably down by her side. But if you were to remove this one's wife from this picture and allow Katie Lee to just bring her arm down, her stance is an entirely natural one also. She's smiling, looking into the camera. The same way that Serge is. But then along comes the facehugger from Alien. Some of you might remember Sesame Street, where they had a song about one of these kids is doing their own thing. This should be playing in relation to this one's wife, because one of these kids is doing her own thing. Two of them are standing normally looking into the camera. The third one is demonstrating her batshit craziness once again. She's got one arm on the shoulder of Katie Lee, preventing her from going anywhere. Now, sometimes when you will have your photograph taken with people who are your close friends, you will lean your head towards them. You will put your arm around them. In some instances, you might just stand next to one another, not necessarily feeling the need to touch them. But where you do touch them, that's born out of your emotional empathy for those individuals. They're long-standing friends of yours or family members. You like them, care about them, probably love them also. But we know with this one's wife that because she's a narcissist, she has no emotional empathy for the people in the picture. What she does is she takes hold of them in this manner, which is entirely unnatural. She's got one hand on Katie Lee's shoulder, the other on her other shoulder. She's leaning in as if she's trying to kiss her. Her body is pressed up against her. It's as if she's saying, me and Katie Lee are a couple. Forget about Serge. We're off to get involved in a bit of spicy poontang shortly. She clings onto this individual because that serves a purpose for her narcissism, but is also representative of her narcissism. Now, this isn't a one-off. We've seen this one's wife behave this way so many times previously. She hugs people that she's met for the first time. I'm a hugger, she declares, because that's the excuse that her narcissism gives for her intrusive lack of boundary recognizing behavior. She interrupts handshakes to hug people. She gets hold of people, pulling them tight, even though they don't want that to actually happen. And she's at it again here. I did a video a couple of months ago about the face hugger from Alien and likening it to This One's Wife. If you've not watched it, go and find it, because it'll tell you plenty about why she behaves this way. But quite simply, the starting point is that this is an interaction between this one's wife and a non-intimate secondary source, a person that she regards as a friend in her fuel matrix. She needs to assert control over this person because this person is on her radar. Her narcissism chooses the assertion of control by physical means, namely, clamp two hands on her, press your head against her, and also press your body up against her. Thus, it's asserting control. She also is subconsciously seeking to provoke a reaction from KD Lee, so that provides this one's wife with fuel. Her narcissism is also managing the facade, which is, see how close I am with this hair colour person. See how close I am with this stylist. We are so close because I'm such a wonderful and likeable person, and you all need to know this. Look at me, I've got a friend, but not just a friend, really close personal friend. This is because I'm so likeable. Look at me, I'm so warm hugging people. Look at me, I'm just so kind, aren't I? This one's wife is behaving that way because it's driven by her narcissism. It enables her to assert control, it enables her to draw fuel, it enables her to manage the facade. But the problem is that in seeking to do those things, her narcissism hasn't taken into account just quite how it looks. There'll be some people who don't understand narcissism will just say it's a nice picture. But those of you that are informed will look at this and think it looks unnatural. That's why so many people have been asking, why does she have to hug people this way? Why does she have to cling on to them in this fashion? It looks needy. It looks desperate. Some have suggested that it might be because it's to avoid her being clipped out of the photograph. It's a valid suggestion, but I don't think that it's actually that applicable. Her narcissism isn't necessarily thinking about that, because remember, her narcissism is such that she believes that she's the centre of attention, and so, consequently, she believes that they would take a picture of both her and Katie Lee. Indeed, she'd be thinking more likely that Serge Normand would be the one who'd be clipped out of the photograph. So it's not so much about any concern that she wants to ensure that you can't cut her out of the photograph, and that's why she clings on. That isn't at the forefront of her mind, nor is it at the forefront of her subconscious reaction as a narcissist. It's all about asserting control over the person that she's interacting with, drawing fuel from them, and presenting an image to the outside world of, I'm a lovely person and see how popular I am. Thus, that's why she's clinging on. And because she doesn't have any boundary recognition, because she operates with this entitlement to treat people in this objectified way, because her narcissism doesn't fully understand that this actually doesn't look that appropriate, she keeps on doing it. And those of us in the know see it for what it is. The desperate and needy behaviour of a narcissist, behaving in an inappropriate fashion. Serge is behaving appropriately, this one's wife isn't. And the two of them provide an interesting contrast with regard to the way that they are around Katie Lee. But that's not just that. There's some more. Have a look at this photograph. It's the trio once again. Serge is smiling. He stood to one side. He hasn't got his arms wrapped around anybody. He's close, but maintaining an appropriate distance. He's close enough because he's being photographed. Again, he's behaving in a normal and natural fashion. But look at this one's wife. Hand still on shoulder, controlling. Hand on other shoulder, still controlling. Katie Lee has no option other than to keep her hand on this one's wife's back. And this time, this one's wife decides to plant a smacker on the side of Katie Lee's face. This is a physical assertion of control, a lack of boundary recognition once again, and is demonstrative of her wanting to show to the world, look at me, aren't I kind and loving? Katie Lee doesn't look too impressed. She looks like she's actually thinking, oof, will you get off me? I feel like I'm being assaulted. She looks somewhat uncomfortable as a consequence of the actions of this one's wife. Once again, this one's wife's narcissism doesn't gauge the situation properly. As I've explained in my brilliant video, The Imitation Game, because she has no emotional empathy, she doesn't actually naturally understand how she should react in these situations. Her narcissism has learned. And what happens is the cherry picker goes off into the warehouse to select the appropriate response, or what it thinks is the appropriate response, and this time has come back with too much hugging, too much touching, too much kissing, i.e. an over-the-top, inappropriate reaction, which is unpacked and applied to this one's wife for her use against this non-intimate secondary source for the purposes of the pursuit of the prime aims. In essence, her narcissism has selected a way of behaving which is inappropriate because she doesn't operate through emotional empathy and behave naturally, she behaves unnaturally. And there is an excellent example of, once again, her inappropriate behaviours. And yet, there's more. On this occasion, KD has managed to stay away from this one's wife, or I suspect it might be prior to her being grabbed, as I've described in the earlier part of this video. But look, there's Serge. This time, he's been subjected to an attempt from the grip of doom as she places her hand on his arm. Once again, being overly tactile, the necessity of touching people when it's not required, but she does so because it's a physical assertion of control. Now, some people might suggest that all of this touching is as a consequence of the fact that she's insecure. In a way, that is kind of right, because it's linked to the necessity of control. She doesn't feel insecure. She's not feeling nervous, so she needs to touch people, but rather because she has this constant need for control when she's around other people, her narcissism with her chooses touch. It does so because as a mid-range narcissist, her image is touchy-feely, huggy, nicey person. And that means that her narcissism regularly goes to utilising the grip of doom on Harry, hugging people when she first meets them, touching them on the arm, touching Harry on the back, prodding Harry, grabbing hold of people, kissing them, and so forth. It's not done because there's any genuine affection. She doesn't have that because she has no emotional empathy. It's done because her style of narcissism goes down this route to assert control. The consequence is it makes her look needy. It makes her look like the Klingon that her narcissism creates her to be. And once again, we see another example of her touching someone. She's overly tactile because her narcissism makes her behave this way in order to pursue the prime aims. Other narcissists would pursue the prime aims by being charismatic. They wouldn't need to be all over somebody in this way. They would use humour. They would be interesting. Their sheer presence could cause it. Other people would assert control through the potential application of violence, through the use of threat. There are lots of different manipulations that a narcissist will use to get to the prime aims. But with her, in such settings, it's this over-familiarity, Klingon behaviour, and it's her narcissism at work. Now you know, again, why she clings on. You can go and tell everybody by reference to this video. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.